I Have Hurt by Queenie and Aj. Introduction. There's a kind of pain that feels like peace when you've carried it long enough. It's not that it feels good, it just feels familiar. And familiarity can be its own kind of drug. We say we want healing, but most of us just want relief. We don't want to face the withdrawals that come from walking away from our own chaos. Guilt, shame, and heartbreak become emotional narcotics. You take them to feel, you take them to forget, and eventually you take them just to function. Pain tricks you into thinking it's part of your identity. It convinces you that peace is unnatural, that stability means something's missing. That's how people self-destruct. Not because they love pain, but because they've built a home in it. Some people use money, alcohol, or love the way others use heroin to chase the high of feeling needed or numb. They'll work their whole lives to escape poverty or heartbreak, then blow through everything just to feel the rush of almost losing it all again. Because deep down, the struggle is the only thing that ever made them feel alive. And guilt, that's the cruelest drug of them all. Guilt will have you apologizing for surviving, for healing, for being happy when someone else is still broken. It will convince you that you owe the world your suffering. But here's the truth. Hurt has a high, but it always has a crash too. And until you stop chasing it, you'll never know what peace feels like sober. Chapter 1, The First Dose Pain, doesn't ask permission. It sneaks in during quiet moments. A betrayal you didn't see coming, a word that cuts too deep, a door that closes just as you step forward. The first time you taste it, it's shocking, sharp, unforgettable. Your body remembers it before your mind even understands. And in that memory, a strange comfort hides. For once, you feel alive. That's how the first dose works. Survival becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. You don't choose it, not really. But the moment your heart learns that hurt can be predictable, it also learns to crave it. There's a paradox in the first taste of pain. It feels unbearable, yet it feels inevitable. You tell yourself it's temporary, a one-time thing. Maybe it's a parent who left too soon, a friend who turned their back, a lover who never learned how to stay. Maybe it's something you can't name, a sense that the world isn't as soft as you once believed. Whatever form it takes, the lesson is the same. You learn to live with it. And when the body learns, the mind quickly follows. The first dose is seductive because it carries a kind of clarity. For the first time, the edges of life feel sharp, precise, real. You feel deeply, as if a veil has lifted and the world is raw and honest. And if you're lucky, that first pain teaches you empathy, resilience, or caution. But for many of us, it's the start of a dangerous lesson. That hurt can be counted on, that it can be trusted, that it will always be there. Children, especially, learn this early. I think about the kid who sits quietly in the corner while the world burns around them, who notices the tension between adults and absorbs it like a sponge. They don't yet know how to articulate the fear or disappointment. They just know it, feel it in their bones, and slowly begin to anticipate it. That anticipation becomes a familiar companion. By the time adolescence hits, the child who first tasted loss or betrayal is already checking their own pulse, measuring their own heart against the rhythm of the world's unpredictability. The first dose wasn't just a lesson, it was a contract signed without consent, a binding agreement between their young self and the chaos of life. First doses aren't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, a friend's slight, a quiet dismissal, the invisible line that says you don't matter as much as someone else. That small sting grows over time, building a foundation of expectation. Life is going to hurt, so prepare yourself. In that moment, pain becomes familiar. It becomes a language we understand before we can speak it. And like any language, fluency comes with repetition. The first dose is the beginning of learning to speak the dialect of suffering, one that few people teach and fewer still understand. It's not uncommon for the first dose to feel like justice. There's a strange sense of fairness when pain hits, a belief that maybe now the world is balancing its scales, finally giving you what you deserve. But the danger is subtle. That sense of fairness can easily twist into addiction. You begin to associate feeling deeply with being alive. You begin to mistake survival for purpose, endurance for strength. You begin to trust pain before you trust peace. And that's where the real trap lies. The body craves consistency. It craves the familiar rhythm of adrenaline, of heartbreak, of guilt. The mind follows, cataloging each memory like a dealer stockpiling product. You start to recognize patterns, even if they're destructive. You start to anticipate hurt like it's a calendar event. Your cousin's wedding, a forgotten birthday, the way someone's voice shifts when they're about to let you down. The first dose teaches you not just that pain exists, it teaches you how to expect it, how to rely on it. And that expectation is the first step toward addiction. Sometimes people try to ignore it, to brush it off as bad luck or a coincidence. But the first dose leaves a mark, an imprint deeper than most of us realize. You may not remember the exact day or the exact words, but you remember the sensation, the hollow in your chest, the tension in your shoulders, the way your stomach knotted like it was trying to hold the world inside. You remember how it felt to have the ground shift beneath your feet without warning, to learn that stability is not guaranteed, that comfort is fragile. And that memory becomes a teacher or a jailer. By the time we're adults, many of us are walking around on autopilot, carrying first doses like weight in our pockets. We look for new highs to match the old pain, recreating experiences that mirror what first taught us how to feel. Relationships, careers, habits, all are touched by the invisible hand of that first lesson. And even when life offers genuine peace or joy, the memory of that first dose whispers, "This won't last. This will hurt. Brace yourself." The first dose is both curse and gift. It awakens you to reality, yes, but it also shows you that you can survive the unimaginable. It introduces you to the paradox that drives every human who ever felt deeply, that hurt is both inevitable and intoxicating, a teacher and a tyrant, a shadow that clings to every bright day. And while you can never fully erase the memory, you can learn to understand it, to meet it without letting it define you. That is the beginning of true mastery over pain. Not pretending it doesn't exist, but recognizing it as a part of life that doesn't have to rule your life. So when the first dose hits, take a moment to notice it. Feel it, yes, but also observe it. Ask yourself what it's teaching, what it's warning you of, and what parts of you are responding. The first dose is unavoidable, but how you interpret it, how you respond, will shape every subsequent chapter of your life. Because here's the truth. The first dose is just the beginning. Every time you face pain after that, you're negotiating with the first lesson you ever learned. You're deciding whether it will be a guide or a master, a signal or a cage. And if you can recognize the moment for what it is, a lesson, not a life sentence, you can begin to take the first real step toward freedom. Chapter 2, Tolerance. At first, every wound aches like fire, but fire teaches you how to burn without dying. Over time, your senses dull. Peace starts to feel like something foreign, like a room with no furniture. You stretch your capacity for pain without noticing, calling it strength, loyalty, endurance. You don't see it yet, but your own suffering has become wallpaper, familiar, bland, and endlessly necessary. Tolerance is subtle. You think you're growing, healing, adapting, but really, you're just raising the bar for what counts as unbearable until nothing shocks you anymore, except maybe ironically calm. It begins innocuously. A partner says something cutting, a friend disappoints you, a colleague undermines your efforts. At first, it stings, sharp and sudden, a reminder that life isn't fair. But each time it happens, something in you adjusts. The shock dulls. The burn recedes faster. You start to anticipate pain before it arrives, preemptively steeling yourself against the next hurt. And when it finally comes, you barely flinch. That's tolerance. The ability to absorb emotional blows without screaming, without crying, without even noticing. People praise this kind of endurance. You're strong. They say, unaware that they're applauding adaptation to trauma, survival tactics that feel less like growth and more like surrender. Because here's the catch. Tolerating pain isn't the same as overcoming it. Tolerance can be a cage disguised as armor. Look at the ways this shows up. The person who stays in a relationship where love is conditional, inconsistent, or invisible. The employee who tolerates constant microaggressions at work because leaving feels riskier than staying. The friend who absorbs criticism after criticism without confrontation, afraid that speaking up will shatter the fragile connection they hold onto. In each case, tolerance is celebrated externally, but internally, it quietly erodes the soul. Tolerance teaches you to live in a gray space where hurt is expected and joy is suspicious. You get so used to the discomfort that calm feels empty and comfort feels undeserved. Peace becomes a stranger knocking politely at the door while you remain suspicious, unwilling to answer. You've learned, consciously or unconsciously, that life's normal rhythm includes chaos, and any deviation is a fluke. So you brace, adjust, and keep moving, rarely noticing that the weight you carry is your own doing. This is why tolerance is both a skill and a trap. It allows survival, yes, but it also trains you to seek the familiar sting, to mistake suffering for stability. The more you survive, the higher your threshold becomes, until you're almost impervious to anything that once would have hurt. And that immunity has consequences. It numbs joy, it blunts intimacy, it teaches your heart to recognize pain as a baseline, a normalcy to be counted on rather than a warning to be respected. Tolerance also teaches self-deception. You start to tell yourself, I'm strong, I can handle this. And maybe you are strong, but strength without discernment is hollow. Endurance without awareness is a form of imprisonment. You convince yourself that suffering is noble, necessary, or even deserved. The more you tolerate, the more you internalize the belief that pain is part of your identity. And once pain becomes a hallmark of who you are, it's difficult to see yourself apart from it. It's in these moments that patterns form. You stay in environments that hurt you over and over because they feel normal. You seek out experiences that trigger that familiar discomfort because the absence of struggle feels alien. The mind begins to rationalize what the heart secretly craves, a steady diet of conflict, chaos, or disappointment. You begin to confuse resilience with addiction. You begin to measure your worth by how much you can withstand rather than how much you can flourish. Tolerance is especially cruel because it works silently. Unlike dramatic heartbreaks or betrayals, it seeps into your life unnoticed. A partner's subtle coldness, a friend's repeated lateness, a family member's dismissive remarks, these are the drip, drip, drip of slow erosion. You adapt, you adjust, you accommodate, all the while believing you're simply being reasonable, strong, or loyal. In reality, your soul is quietly becoming habituated to discomfort, learning to treat it as standard operating procedure. And yet, tolerance has a strange duality. It protects you while it confines you. Without it, the first dose of pain would devastate you. With it, you can walk through life seemingly unscathed, appearing calm and competent, even thriving in superficial ways. But underneath, there's a subtle cost. A mind conditioned to accept chaos, a heart desensitized to joy, a spirit that hesitates when offered peace. Tolerance, in its quiet wisdom, teaches you both survival and suspension, survival at the price of living fully. Consider the irony. Those who endure the most are often the most addicted to struggle. The longer you tolerate, the more your nervous system learns that life is meant to be a challenge, that stability is suspicious, and that love, success, or ease will inevitably disappoint. Tolerance creates a paradoxical craving, not for excitement or danger, but for the comfort of known pain. You no longer chase highs or lows. You chase the predictable sting, the emotional rhythm your body and mind have memorized. Breaking this cycle requires awareness, noticing where your tolerance has calcified into expectation, where endurance has become addiction, and where survival has begun to feel like a substitute for thriving. It requires asking hard questions. Am I still here because I want to be, or because this pattern is familiar? Am I tolerating love, comfort, or joy in the same way I tolerated neglect, disappointment, or betrayal? Can I recognize the difference between strength and self-imposed suffering? Tolerance isn't inherently bad. It's a skill we all need to navigate life's unavoidable hardships. But it becomes dangerous when it blurs the line between survival and addiction, between resilience and habituation. The challenge is learning to hold pain without letting it define you, to endure without internalizing, and to recognize when calm is not a threat, but a gift. The first dose teaches you that pain exists. Tolerance teaches you that pain is normal. And if you're not careful, tolerance teaches you to depend on it, to measure your life by how much you can endure rather than how much you can enjoy. The moment you begin to see tolerance in this light is the moment the first real choice appears, to continue accepting pain as standard, or to recognize the possibility of peace as something attainable. Because here's the paradox. True strength is not measured by how much you endure, but by how willing you are to step into discomfort without relying on it to define you. Tolerance alone is survival. Awareness transforms survival into freedom. And freedom, unlike pain, is never learned. It must be consciously chosen. Chapter 3, Withdrawal Symptoms. Try stepping away from it, from the chaos, the guilt, the heartbreak, and you'll find a vacuum. At first, it feels empty, hollow, as though something vital has been stolen. Your body searches for what it knows. Your mind replays the old highs, and your heart whispers that quiet is a lie. Withdrawal isn't just missing pain. It's realizing that peace is uncharted territory. It's ironic, isn't it? We spend our lives chasing relief from hurt, and yet when the hurt begins to fade, we panic. Our nervous system, trained for tension and turmoil, doesn't immediately recognize calm as safe. We feel restless, agitated, even guilty, as if we're betraying our own history by allowing ourselves to rest. The absence of chaos can be heavier than the presence of it because we've built ourselves around suffering. Withdrawal symptoms are subtle at first. You wake up expecting tension and disappointment, and when it doesn't arrive, your body thrums with confusion. You feel disoriented, uncertain of what to do with the silence. You scroll through old messages, replay old arguments, dredge up old regrets, seeking the familiar spike of emotional adrenaline that once made you feel alive. It's almost like the body forgets that it can survive without the constant shock of hurt. This is why the calm feels fake. Peace is unfamiliar, a strange landscape where your usual coping mechanisms, hypervigilance, overthinking, blame, self-sabotage, feel unnecessary. Your muscles relax, but your mind resists. Your chest feels lighter, yet hollow. The first nights without the familiar ache can feel like insomnia, not because you can't sleep, but because your system has forgotten how. You are detoxing, not from a substance, but from an emotional addiction you've carried for years. Withdrawal is also a mirror. It reflects not just the absence of pain, but the parts of yourself you've ignored while immersed in it. Those long-buried fears, unexamined choices, and neglected desires rise to the surface when chaos steps aside. Suddenly, there's nothing to distract you, and everything you've avoided becomes unavoidable. The mind, starved of its habitual hurt, begins to invent new turmoil, sometimes trivial, sometimes terrifying, anything to fill the void of normalcy. Consider the person who leaves a toxic relationship, expecting relief, and finds only anxiety. Their pulse races at silence, their stomach knots at peace, their thoughts chase shadows of conflict. It isn't the other person they miss, it's the rhythm of turmoil, the adrenaline of emotional survival. The withdrawal is proof of addiction, not to a person, but to the emotional patterns that once defined their existence. Withdrawal is deceptive. It masquerades as weakness, impatience, or insecurity. You feel shaky, irritable, maybe even desperate. You wonder if you've made a mistake leaving the old patterns behind. You question whether calm is safe, whether peace is real, whether you even deserve it. But these are the very signals that your system is recalibrating, retraining itself to live without the constant high of hurt. The discomfort is temporary, but necessary. And yes, there will be cravings. You'll long for the rush of heartbreak, the familiar sting of betrayal, the guilt that once kept you tethered. You might find yourself scrolling old texts, replaying conversations in your head, or imagining scenarios that never happened, all to feel that spark again. It's a cruel illusion. The mind wants its fix, not the reality of the situation. It wants the sensation more than the truth. Withdrawal is also lonely. Those who have lived in pain for decades often forget how to be alone with peace. Silence feels deafening, stillness oppressive. Friends, family, even strangers may offer comfort, but it doesn't reach the part of you trained to expect suffering. The first moments without hurt are often the hardest because they strip away everything that's been holding you together, leaving you to meet yourself fully for the first time. Yet there is power here. Withdrawal is a threshold, a liminal space between the old life defined by pain and a new life defined by choice. The emptiness you feel is fertile. It's a blank canvas for rebuilding your identity, your habits, your relationships. What emerges here may be uncertain, awkward, or frightening, but it's authentic. And authenticity is the antidote to addiction. It helps to recognize the signs of withdrawal for what they are. Not failure, not weakness, not evidence that you weren't ready, but proof that you've been training your system to depend on suffering. Each restless night, each pang of guilt, each craving for old conflict is a signal of progress. Your body and mind are adjusting to a new baseline, one where peace is possible and safety is not suspicious. Withdrawal also teaches patience. You cannot rush the recalibration of your nervous system. You cannot force calm to feel normal overnight. Each day of discomfort, each moment of restlessness is a step toward rewiring your instincts. The cravings will fade, the panic will ease, and gradually the absence of pain will become familiar. Peace, once unimaginable, will become tolerable, then desirable, then natural. The challenge is resisting the temptation to return to what's familiar. When withdrawal becomes intense, you may be tempted to seek out the old patterns, to reconnect with chaos, to reintroduce drama just to feel normal again. This is the critical moment. Recognizing that craving doesn't signal need, it signals habit. Freedom isn't found by chasing what hurts, it's found by staying present with what heals. Withdrawal is also the beginning of awareness. For the first time, you notice the difference between addiction and choice, between habit and instinct, between survival and thriving. You recognize the ways you've romanticized pain, excused suffering, and conflated endurance with strength. And with that recognition comes agency. You can choose differently. You can step into life without expecting it to hurt. You can allow yourself the discomfort of calm without recoiling. This chapter, Withdrawal, is both the scariest and the most crucial. It is the crucible where the body, mind, and heart are tested, not by external forces, but by themselves. It forces you to confront the reality that you can survive without hurt, that calm is not betrayal, that peace is not weakness. The symptoms are temporary, but the lesson is permanent. Life is richer, wider, and more vibrant than the rhythms of pain you've been trained to follow. Withdrawal teaches one last crucial lesson. The first dose, the tolerance, the endless cycle of seeking hurt. It was never about the pain itself. It was about familiarity, identity, and survival. And stepping into the void of calm allows you to reclaim life on your terms. It hurts because you're unlearning an addiction to suffering, and that is as significant as learning to love yourself. Chapter 4, The Dealer. Pain never comes alone. It has accomplices, enforcers, and suppliers. In the story of emotional addiction, these suppliers are guilt, shame, fear, and nostalgia, the dealers who keep you coming back for more, long after you've tried to walk away. They are invisible, but they're always there, lurking in the corners of your mind, whispering that what hurt you is what defines you. Think of guilt first. It's subtle, almost polite, at least at first. Guilt nudges you, reminds you of the times you failed, the words you said too sharply, the love you withheld. It tells you that if you just suffer enough, if you just carry enough weight on your shoulders, you'll finally be worthy. Guilt doesn't just punish, it keeps the connection to pain alive, linking your present to every past mistake you thought you'd outgrown. The dealer always has the receipt. Shame works differently. Where guilt targets actions, shame targets identity. Shame whispers that you are broken, unworthy, too much, too little, too messy, too quiet, too loud. Shame makes the familiar ache of inadequacy addictive. It convinces you that your flaws are permanent fixtures and that you must continue to punish yourself in order to belong, to survive, to matter. It's a relentless supplier, one that ensures the highs and lows of emotional hurt are never ending. Fear is a dealer you can't bargain with. Fear convinces you that stepping away from pain is dangerous. Fear insists that comfort is a lie, that joy will betray you, that peace will vanish if you let it in. Fear thrives on the unknown, capitalizing on your hesitation, your second guessing, your what ifs. Every time you hesitate to speak up, to leave, or to choose differently, fear takes its cut, reinforcing the familiar rhythms of suffering. Then there's nostalgia. Often mistaken for a gentle reminder of better times, nostalgia is sly. It romanticizes the pain you've endured, glossing over the hurt and magnifying the emotional intensity of the past. You replay old memories, not for the joy they brought, but for the rush of the familiar ache, the bittersweet sting that once made life feel real. Nostalgia ensures that even the moments you thought were behind you are recycled, resold, and repurposed, keeping the dealer in business long after the original transaction. These dealers are cunning because they rarely operate openly. They are not loud or confrontational. They are whisperers, subtle manipulators. You may not notice their presence until you pause and realize that your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions have been choreographed around them for years. Every regret, every pang of longing, every self-imposed punishment is a payment to the dealer, a transaction that keeps you tethered to the highs and lows of your own emotional addiction. Consider the subtlety in daily life. The coworker who reminds you of your limits, the ex who triggers old guilt, the parent who silently disapproves. These are the agents through which the dealers operate. They are not inherently cruel. In fact, many are simply human. But the dealers exploit the fact that your mind has been trained to associate discomfort with survival and familiarity with safety. Every replayed insult, every recalled disappointment, every internalized critique is a refill of the emotional currency the dealer thrives on. The dealer is persistent because it knows something you sometimes forget, that human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. Your nervous system craves predictability. Pain, once internalized, becomes predictable. And the dealer, with its supply of guilt, shame, fear, and nostalgia, provides that predictability in abundance. You know where it will hit, what it will feel like, and how long it will last. And in that predictability, you find a twisted sense of comfort. You may think you're choosing these emotions, but in truth, they are orchestrating your choices. You wake up worried about a text you didn't send, anxious about a conversation you don't want to have, nostalgic for a relationship that no longer exists, ashamed of a failure long past. These feelings are not random. They are the dealer's work, keeping you tethered to emotional highs and lows that mirror the first dose you ever took. Even when you consciously attempt to step away from pain, the dealer intervenes. You might leave a toxic relationship, quit a stressful job, or confront a source of betrayal. And yet guilt, shame, fear, and nostalgia find new ways to haunt you. They replay old arguments, invent imagined failures, and magnify insecurities. They ensure that the withdrawal from pain is never clean, never complete. Every step toward peace is met with reminders that hurt is the currency you've always traded in. The dealer's work is most obvious when you reflect on patterns. How many times have you relived the same argument in your head over and over, hours or years after it happened? How many times have you told yourself, "I'll never get it right," or "I'm not enough"? That is the dealer at work, ensuring you never fully leave the emotional high of hurt behind. It's a clever business model. Pain is recycled, resold, and repurposed, all without your conscious awareness. But there is hope. Awareness is the first step to reclaiming your autonomy from the dealer. You cannot eliminate guilt, shame, fear, or nostalgia entirely. They are part of the human experience. But you can refuse to let them dictate your emotional life. You can recognize their influence, acknowledge it, and choose whether to respond or release. The dealer only has power if you continue to make transactions. With observation, the balance shifts. You begin to reclaim the high ground, paying attention to life on your own terms rather than on the dealer's timetable. Part of that awareness involves naming the dealer's methods. When guilt arises, notice it. When fear strikes, label it. When shame whispers, call it out. When nostalgia tempts you to relive old suffering, pause and recognize the illusion. In doing so, you disrupt the dealer's flow, break the automatic pattern, and reclaim a space where calm and joy can exist without interference. The dealer thrives on your unawareness. But once you see it, once you understand that every pang of guilt or rush of fear is part of a system designed to keep you hooked, you begin to reclaim choice. You start to build immunity. You recognize that pain no longer needs to define you, that the past does not have to dictate your present, and that your worth is not measured by how much you endure, but by how fully you allow yourself to live. The dealer will always be there, but your relationship with it can change. You can acknowledge its existence without submitting to its power. You can sit with guilt without letting it dominate. Remember the past without being enslaved by nostalgia. Feel fear without letting it prevent growth, and meet shame without letting it consume you. Withdrawal, tolerance, and first doses were only chapters in a larger story. The dealer is part of the story too, but not the ending. In the end, recognizing the dealer is an act of liberation. It is the moment you step off autopilot, the moment you see that emotional addiction has been orchestrated, and the moment you begin to reclaim life on your own terms. Pain will still exist, of course. Life is never free from it. But the dealer's hold over your experience can be broken, one awareness at a time. Chapter 5, The Excuse of Intoxication. Some people drink, some smoke, some lie, cheat, lash out, and almost all of them say the same thing afterward: I wasn't myself. It's the classic line, the convenient shield against accountability. Intoxication in its many forms becomes an excuse. Alcohol, drugs, food, even emotional outbursts all serve the same purpose. They justify behavior without forcing the person to confront the truth underneath. And often, that truth is unbearable, that the pain, guilt, or fear that has been carried for years hasn't gone away. It's simply been masked. Intoxication is seductive because it promises freedom. For a night, an hour, a moment, you can step outside the prison of yourself. You can act without restraint, feel without fear, love without doubt, or hate without remorse. And in that temporary liberation, there is relief, a high that tells you, I am no longer bound by the past, by my mistakes, by my shame. But freedom built on escape is fragile. It lasts only as long as the substance or the act, and then the consequences return, often sharper than before. Consider the simplest form, alcohol. A person drinks to blur the edges of grief or anxiety, to soften the sting of reality, to create a buffer between themselves and the world. For a while it works. The thoughts quiet, the heart slows, the memory of hurt recedes. But when the buzz fades, the pain returns, sometimes magnified, and the line comes again, I wasn't myself. That line is more than an excuse. It's a contract with avoidance, a declaration that the real self, the one carrying all the history, is too heavy to inhabit. Intoxication is not always chemical. People do it with relationships too. They jump from one fleeting connection to another. Hiding behind the excitement, novelty, or chaos is claiming, I wasn't myself. They use love as anesthesia, chasing highs instead of depth. Avoiding intimacy because facing real vulnerability would mean acknowledging their own pain. Emotional intoxication keeps the dealer, guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia, in business, supplying the familiar high without challenging the underlying addiction to hurt. Some people intoxicate themselves with anger. They lash out at loved ones, strangers, even themselves, and then shrug off the consequences saying, I didn't mean it. I was angry. Anger, like alcohol, is temporary relief. It's a quick rush, a way to discharge the pressure that has been building in a lifetime of tolerated pain. And yet, once it subsides, the aftermath remains. Words cannot be unsaid, trust cannot be replaced, and the underlying hurt, the one the anger was masking, still exists, waiting patiently for attention. Even kindness can be an intoxicant. Some people give endlessly, overextending themselves, filling every moment with service or sacrifice. I just wanted to help. On the surface, it appears noble, but sometimes it's a high too. The rush of being needed, the addictive comfort of being the one others rely on, the emotional dopamine of validation. The dealer smiles in these moments as well, because even altruism can become a mask, a way to avoid sitting quietly with oneself, to avoid facing the emptiness that comes from withdrawing from old pain. The pattern is unmistakable. Intoxication, in all its forms, offers temporary relief, but ensures long-term repetition. It allows the mind to say, I'm not accountable, I'm not responsible, I'm not hurting alone. The dealer thrives in this ecosystem because every high purchase through avoidance is a refill of the emotional currency: guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia. The momentary liberation always comes at the cost of prolonging the addiction. And yet, there is a lesson in this excuse. Recognizing the ways you've used intoxication as a crutch is the first step toward mastery. Not to shame, not to condemn, but to observe. Ask yourself, when I claim I wasn't myself, what part of me am I really hiding from? What truths am I unwilling to face? Which dealers am I paying to keep old pain alive, simply because it feels familiar? The answer is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also liberating, because once named, it can be confronted, not masked. Intoxication, whether through substances, behaviors, or emotions, is a mirror. It reflects the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, magnifying the gaps between who we are and who we've pretended to be. It illuminates the places where the first dose, tolerance, and withdrawal intersect, showing us the patterns that have kept us bound. And once you see the reflection clearly, you have the opportunity to step away from it, to refuse the excuse, and to inhabit yourself fully without sedation. The truth is uncomfortable but necessary. No substance, no outburst, no relationship, no act of overcompensation can erase the past. No, I wasn't myself can absolve the pain that continues to linger in quiet moments. The only way forward is to meet the self you've been avoiding, to sit with the discomfort that has always been yours, and to slowly, patiently reclaim life without masking it. And yes, it will be difficult. The cravings for escape will return, sometimes with ferocity. You will long for the quick high, the easy relief, the temporary detachment. But each time you resist, each time you allow yourself to feel fully, even uncomfortably, you are retraining your system. You are proving that calm can exist, that peace is not betrayal, that joy is not dangerous. The dealers may still whisper, but their power diminishes with awareness and choice. Intoxication is an excuse only as long as you allow it to be. You can honor its seductive nature without surrendering to it. You can recognize the relief it promises while refusing to trade authenticity for temporary comfort. And in doing so, you reclaim the one thing that no dealer, no first dose, no pattern of tolerance can ever truly touch: your agency, your presence, your life lived without excuses. Because the final truth is this: being yourself, whole, unmasked, sober in mind and heart, is the only high worth chasing. Everything else is just a transaction with a dealer who has no investment in your freedom, only in your dependence. Choosing yourself, fully, consciously, and without apology, is the first real act of liberation from the cycle that began with that very first dose of pain. Chapter 6, The Cycle of Self-Sabotage. You think you're safe. You think you've escaped the old patterns. The first dose, the tolerance, the withdrawal, the dealer, the excuses, and then it happens. Life begins to feel good. Not just bearable, but genuinely good. Maybe it's a relationship, a job, a moment of personal growth, or simply a day without chaos. And then something inside you stirs, restless, uneasy, insistent. Something that says, this doesn't belong. You can't feel this calm. You're not allowed to be this happy. This is self-sabotage. The moment your life threatens to stabilize, the cravings for the familiar high of hurt, guilt, or chaos rise. It doesn't feel conscious. You're not plotting destruction. You're responding to an old addiction that still lives in your nervous system. Just as tolerance taught your body to endure pain, self-sabotage teaches it to need it. You chase discomfort as if it were a lifeline, even when safety and joy are finally within reach. The signs are subtle at first. You miss deadlines, provoke arguments, isolate yourself, or make choices that feel inexplicably wrong. You create tension where none exists. You ghost people who love you, unconsciously ensuring that disappointment and conflict re-enter your life. It's almost as if your mind is testing the waters, asking, is this calm real or am I dreaming? Self-sabotage is emotional withdrawal disguised as action. It's the nervous system's way of recreating the familiar rush of pain and chaos, even if the consequences are ruinous. A promotion, a peaceful relationship, or a quiet weekend feels foreign, unsafe, unnatural. So you find a way to puncture it, to remind yourself of the emotional highs you've been addicted to all along. It's not about hatred or malice, it's about craving the familiar rhythm of hurt. Consider the patterns. You finally meet someone who values you, and instead of leaning into connection, you withdraw. You push, provoke, or argue, not because you want to, but because the absence of struggle feels dangerous. You finally achieve a career milestone, and instead of celebrating, you second guess, self-criticize, or make choices that jeopardize your success. You begin to chase something unavailable, something impossible, simply to recreate the emotional spike of tension you've come to expect. The cycle is cruel because it's invisible from the inside. You can't always see that you are sabotaging yourself. You feel reactive, impulsive, compelled, a passenger in your own life, carried along by instincts wired in childhood, trauma, or long-standing patterns. The more often you repeat it, the more automatic it becomes, until the sabotage feels as natural as breathing. You mistake it for intuition, mood, or circumstance, but it is neither. It is the addiction manifesting, demanding payment for the highs it once supplied. The moments of self-sabotage are also deeply instructive if you're willing to see them. They reveal what you have been trained to crave, emotional turbulence. They reveal the areas where tolerance still reigns, where withdrawal still aches, and where the dealer's influence, guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia, remains unbroken. They expose the gaps between survival and thriving, between enduring life and fully inhabiting it. Self-sabotage often masquerades as logic, righteousness, or morality. You convince yourself that you are protecting yourself, that the other person doesn't deserve you, that the opportunity is flawed, that happiness is fleeting. And sometimes, yes, there is wisdom in caution, but more often, the self-inflicted wounds are unnecessary. They are the echoes of the first dose, reminders that pain has always been familiar, safe, even comforting. You sabotage because calm feels alien. You sabotage because peace is suspicious. The cruelest part? The cycle is self-perpetuating. Each act of sabotage reinforces the belief that you cannot maintain joy, stability, or love. Each emotional crash, each argument, each failed opportunity strengthens the nervous system's attachment to the emotional high of pain. You tell yourself stories. I knew it wouldn't last. I'm not meant for this. Things always fall apart. And in doing so, you pay the dealer once again, over and over, for a high you never consciously chose. Breaking the cycle requires awareness and intention. You must recognize the pattern, the push, the provoke, the self-inflicted wound for what it is. You must ask, am I sabotaging myself to avoid joy or to chase the familiar pain? You must notice the cravings for chaos, the subtle internal compulsion to punish yourself, and interrupt it. The moment of awareness is the doorway to choice. Part of healing from self-sabotage is learning to sit with discomfort without creating it. You must tolerate calm, allow stability, and inhabit joy without fear. The nervous system will protest. The dealers will whisper. The old cravings will spike. And yes, you may fail, stumble, or revert. But each time you recognize the pattern and make a conscious choice instead, you weaken the cycle. You reclaim a fraction of freedom that has been obscured by addiction for years. Self-sabotage also teaches humility. It reminds you that healing is not linear, that recovery is not a straight path, and that old patterns are resilient. You cannot simply will them away. You must confront them, examine them, and practice resisting them repeatedly. This is the labor of emotional sobriety, showing up for yourself even when the nervous system is trained to crave the familiar chaos. And yet, there is hope. Every act of conscious resistance strengthens new neural pathways, rewiring the brain to recognize that stability and joy are safe. Every moment where you pause before reacting, where you choose connection over isolation, where you accept peace instead of sabotaging it, you chip away at the cycle. You prove to yourself, in small, cumulative ways, that life can exist outside the high of hurt. The cycle of self-sabotage is ultimately a lesson in agency. It is proof that addiction is not just chemical or external, but emotional and internal. It teaches you to notice, to name, and to resist. It forces confrontation with the familiar, uncomfortable truths that pain has been addictive, that calm is unfamiliar, and that survival without thriving is not enough. The key is persistence. The nervous system, the dealer, and your own habits will resist. You will feel the pull of old patterns. You may even convince yourself that you prefer the chaos, that peace is boring, that joy is dangerous. But each time you recognize the cycle, you reclaim choice. Each act of resistance rewires expectation. Each conscious pause rewrites the story that has been unconsciously repeating since the first dose of pain. Self-sabotage is not failure. It is evidence that you are unlearning an addiction as old as your history. It is proof that change requires courage, patience, and vigilance. And ultimately, it is the teacher that shows you where your freedom begins. In the spaces where you used to create your own storms, you now have the power to choose calm, stability, and life fully lived. Chapter 7, The False Security of Struggle. You've been conditioned to believe that struggle equals worth, that every wound, every heartbreak, every sleepless night, every hardship you survived is proof of your value. And maybe it is, in small ways. Survival is no small feat, but there's a dangerous illusion hidden within the endurance. The belief that without struggle, life is meaningless, like that without constant chaos, you are failing. This is the false security of struggle. It convinces you that pain is necessary, that hardship is a badge of honor, that emotional turbulence validates your existence. It reassures the nervous system that life is familiar, predictable, and safe, even if the familiarity comes wrapped in guilt, shame, fear, and regret. Struggle feels like identity. Without it, you fear being empty, irrelevant, or unworthy. Think about the moments in your life when peace finally arrives. A stable job, a supportive partner, a day when you sleep through the night without anxiety gnawing at your chest. For some, it triggers panic. The mind whispers, "This can't be real. I'm not allowed to be this calm. Something must be wrong." And before you know it, you manufacture struggle, an argument, an imagined crisis, a self-imposed obstacle. Because without struggle, you feel exposed, vulnerable, inadequate. Struggle becomes a security blanket. The constant pressure, tension, and worry, it's familiar, predictable. You know exactly how to navigate it. It may be painful, but it's safe because it is known. Peace, in contrast, is alien. Stability feels suspicious. Joy feels fleeting. Love without conflict feels fragile. So you unconsciously recreate struggle to restore the equilibrium your mind has been trained to expect. Consider the patterns: the overworked parent who can't rest even when the bills are paid, the employee who sabotages recognition because success feels unnatural, the person in a healthy relationship who seeks drama or mistrust to mimic old emotional highs. In each case, struggle is safety, not chaos. Pain is proof. Suffering is a familiar companion. Without it, the self feels incomplete, untested, unvalidated. False security is also reinforced by culture, family, and history. Hard work, perseverance through adversity, earning your keep. These phrases are not inherently harmful, but when taken to extremes, they glorify struggle while dismissing peace. You are taught to measure worth by endurance, to romanticize pain as noble, to treat stability as weakness. The dealers, guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia, smile quietly as society reinforces the addiction. Every affirmation of struggle is another transaction. The danger is subtle. The mind doesn't scream, you're addicted to hardship. It whispers, you deserve this. This is proof. Keep going. And you obey, mistaking the compulsion for duty, obligation, or morality. You chase the highs of near failure, the adrenaline of crisis, the intensity of being tested. In doing so, you perpetuate the cycle, trading peace for the illusion of purpose. There is also a social dimension. People admire struggle because it is visible, dramatic, and easily measured. The sacrifices, the long hours, the late nights. These are proof that you care, that you are committed, that you are strong. But the quiet endurance of peace, the steady cultivation of joy, the gentle, consistent effort to maintain stability, these are often invisible. Struggle validates you to the outside world. Peace validates only to yourself. The false security of struggle also thrives internally. The nervous system craves the familiar spikes of stress, the hormonal rush of survival, the adrenaline of adversity. Pain may be tiring, exhausting, and painful, but it's predictable. Calm is unfamiliar. Stability is strange. Safety feels like it could collapse at any moment. And so the mind manufactures mini crises, magnifies minor setbacks, and constructs barriers, all to recreate the emotional high of struggle. But there is a paradox here. The very struggle you cling to as proof of worth often prevents you from realizing your fullest potential. You may achieve milestones, build relationships, or create art, but the constant craving for chaos ensures you never experience these fully. The joy is tainted by anxiety, the accomplishment overshadowed by self-doubt, the peace undermined by fear. Struggle becomes both the foundation and the barrier, the familiar that confines rather than frees. The key to escaping false security lies in awareness. Notice the moments when you push back against peace. Observe when you magnify obstacles or seek drama unnecessarily. Reflect on why stability feels threatening. Ask yourself, am I avoiding calm because it feels unsafe, or because I've been addicted to the high of struggle? Naming it is the first step toward choosing differently. Another step is deliberate practice. Allow yourself to inhabit calm, even when it feels uncomfortable. Celebrate success without critique. Embrace relationships without testing them. Let joy exist without suspicion. These acts of conscious resistance slowly retrain the nervous system, showing it that safety, stability, and happiness are not threats, but rights. False security also diminishes with forgiveness of self and circumstance. You cannot rewrite the past, and you cannot erase the pain that once defined you, but you can release its control over your present. You can step into life without needing constant proof that you are surviving, worthy, or valid. You can allow peace to be your baseline and struggle to exist only when necessary, rather than as the default. Ultimately, the false security of struggle is a lesson in perception. It teaches that familiarity can masquerade as necessity, that identity can become entangled with hardship, and that human beings often mistake endurance for purpose. Recognizing this pattern is liberating because it reveals a choice that has always existed but was obscured by habit. You can step away from struggle without stepping away from yourself. Peace, when it is allowed, feels unfamiliar at first. It may feel fragile, fleeting, or suspicious. But with awareness and practice, it becomes not just tolerable, but trustworthy. Stability becomes a source of strength rather than fear. Joy becomes a tool for growth rather than a trap. You realize that the highs you once chased in chaos were illusions of vitality, and that true vitality exists in calm, conscious, and intentional living. Struggle has its place, yes, but it is not the foundation of your worth. It is not the measure of your identity. The false security it offers is temporary, even comforting, but ultimately limiting. Peace, authenticity, and choice, these are the real currencies of life. And when you embrace them, you step out of the dealer's shadow and into a life that is not dictated by the highs of hurt, the cravings for chaos, or the addiction to struggle. Chapter 8, The Hangover. After every high comes a crash. It is inevitable. Every surge of pain, every rush of chaos, every moment of emotional intoxication carries a cost. The mind and body, trained for years to chase the familiar, demand payment. And when the euphoria fades, whether it was the adrenaline of drama, the intoxication of anger, or the temporary relief of distraction, you are left with the aftermath, the emotional hangover. The hangover is quiet at first, almost imperceptible. A subtle exhaustion, a heaviness in the chest, a low hum of regret. But as the day progresses, it grows louder, more insistent. You replay conversations in your mind, analyze your decisions, and question your actions. You notice the gaps between intention and outcome, the moments where control slipped, the words that stung more than they should have. And slowly, the haze lifts, leaving clarity, or at least a painful approximation of it. This is the stage where honesty begins to emerge. The hangover strips away illusions. It exposes the truth that intoxication, in any form, was temporary, that the chaos was manufactured, that the emotional high you chased was a short-term fix for a long-term void. It forces confrontation with what you have been avoiding, whether consciously or unconsciously. The hangover is brutal, but it is also a teacher. Consider the familiar patterns. You lashed out, avoided, drank, overworked, or clung to drama, and now you are paying the price. Maybe it's guilt for things said or left unsaid. Maybe it's regret over opportunities squandered. Maybe it's a hollow ache where joy could have been. Every hangover is a ledger, a record of transactions with the dealer. Guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia. The balance is always due, and the crash is the collection. The emotional hangover is more than just remorse. It is insight disguised as discomfort. It is the mind's way of saying, look at what you have done. Look at what you've chosen. Look at the consequences. Pain has a high, yes, but the hangover reveals its price. It is the moment when you must face yourself without distraction, without escape, without the excuse that I wasn't myself. You were yourself, fully, and the truth of that self, flawed, human, capable, stands before you, unvarnished. Hangovers also carry clarity about patterns. They reveal the moments when self-sabotage crept in, when intoxication offered false relief, when the cycle of struggle was unnecessarily prolonged. They illuminate the ways you have invested in pain, repeated old habits, and allowed the dealer to thrive. And while the pain of this realization is uncomfortable, it is also freeing. Awareness is the first currency of change. One of the most insidious aspects of the hangover is its capacity to make you doubt yourself. You question your choices, your instincts, your worth. The mind whispers, you will always fall back. You are weak. You cannot change. But this is a distortion, not a decree. The hangover is a snapshot, a temporary assessment of consequence, not a lifelong sentence. It is a mirror, not a verdict. And how you respond to that mirror, with judgment or with observation, determines whether the hangover becomes a catalyst or a cage. The hangover also teaches the value of pause. The high demanded action, reaction, impulsivity. The hangover demands reflection, stillness, and presence. It is the universe's way of forcing you to slow down, to process, to recognize the cost of living on autopilot. Every hangover is an opportunity to step back from patterns, to examine the roles guilt, shame, fear, and nostalgia played, and to decide, consciously, whether you will continue to pay the dealer or reclaim your agency. In many ways, the hangover is an initiation into emotional maturity. It is the liminal space between indulgence and awareness, between addiction and autonomy, between chaos and calm. Those who ignore the hangover, who rush to numb it, who repeat the cycle without reflection, remain trapped in the rhythm of highs and crashes. But those who lean into it, who feel it fully, who let it illuminate old patterns, begin the work of transformation. Part of the hangover is accepting responsibility, not blame, not shame, but honest acknowledgement. You must own your choices, your actions, and your reactions. You must recognize that intoxication was temporary, self-sabotage was predictable, and struggle was often manufactured. Ownership does not erase the past, but it allows you to approach the future differently, to break patterns rather than perpetuate them, to pay attention to the quiet cues that previously went unnoticed. Recovery from the hangover requires patience. It cannot be rushed. The body, mind, and spirit need time to recalibrate, to detox from the emotional highs and lows that have dominated existence for years. Self-compassion becomes essential. You must treat yourself with the same care you would offer someone else, emerging from a night of indulgence, a storm of chaos, or the grips of pain. The hangover is not punishment. It is reflection. It is insight delivered with discomfort as a messenger, and there is a subtle beauty in it. In the hangover, you are forced into honesty. In the hangover, you see the ways you have grown, even if incrementally. You recognize the patterns you are beginning to change. You confront the dealer and note its diminishing hold. The hangover is painful, yes, but it is also proof. Proof that you are aware. Proof that you have choice. Proof that transformation is possible. Finally, the hangover teaches gratitude for peace, even when it is small. The clarity it brings allows you to value moments of calm, to recognize when struggle is unnecessary, to celebrate victories without guilt. Each hangover becomes less punishing and more instructive, a way to measure progress rather than failure, to observe growth rather than dwell on mistakes. It is the bridge between addiction and autonomy, between chaos and consciousness. The emotional hangover reminds you of a fundamental truth. The highs are temporary, but awareness is lasting. The rush of pain, the intoxication of chaos, the seductive allure of struggle, all pass. What remains, if you are willing to observe, is insight. What remains if you're willing to reflect is wisdom. What remains if you're willing to face it fully is the foundation for change, for liberation, and for true emotional sobriety. Every hangover is inevitable, but it is also transformative. It is the stage where you pause, breathe, observe, and choose. You recognize the patterns that once held you captive, see the dealers for what they are, and begin to step into a life that values stability, awareness, and presence over addiction, chaos, and temporary relief. In this liminal space, the seeds of emotional freedom are planted. And when the hangover passes, as it always does, you emerge with clarity, with intention, and with the capacity to navigate life differently. The crash is no longer a punishment. It is an invitation. The hangover, in all its discomfort, is proof that the high of hurt has a cost, and that you, finally, are learning to pay attention without paying the price. Chapter 9, Detoxing from Guilt. Guilt is a powerful drug. It seeps into the cracks of your mind and heart, disguising itself as morality, responsibility, or conscience. It convinces you that every misstep, every hurt, every lapse in judgment is proof that you are fundamentally flawed. And like any powerful substance, guilt is addictive. You chase it, carry it, wear it like armor, and before long, it becomes inseparable from your identity. Detoxing from guilt is not about forgetting the past or dismissing the pain you caused. It is not about excusing behavior or avoiding responsibility. True detox is about untangling yourself from the belief that your value is directly tied to your mistakes. It is about learning that accountability does not require self-hatred, and that forgiveness of self is not betrayal of others. The first step in detox is acknowledgement. You must confront the ways guilt has infiltrated your life. Where have you apologized for surviving? Where have you carried shame that was never yours to bear? Where have you believed, consciously or unconsciously, that your happiness is contingent on the suffering of others? These are the places the dealer, guilt itself, thrives. Naming them is the first act of liberation. Next comes understanding. Guilt often disguises deeper truths: fear, regret, insecurity, or empathy gone awry. It whispers, "You should feel this way. You owe this to others." And in doing so, it perpetuates the cycle of addiction to pain. Understanding that guilt is a messenger, not a master, allows you to separate the emotion from your identity. You are not your guilt. You are a human being navigating a complex world, capable of mistakes, learning, and growth. Detox requires observation without judgment. The mind resists this fiercely. You may notice impulses to ruminate, to replay the past, to inflate mistakes into proof of worthlessness. You may feel uncomfortable, exposed, or unworthy. These are the withdrawal symptoms, echoes of a lifetime of guilt. Sit with them, watch them, recognize them as transient, like waves rising and falling, rather than truths etched in stone. Forgiveness of self is central. To forgive yourself is not to erase history or deny consequence. It is to release the internalized punishment, the endless cycle of self-condemnation that has been your habitual companion. It is the conscious decision to stop trading suffering for proof of moral integrity. Forgiveness allows you to acknowledge that you did the best you could with the tools, awareness, and circumstances you had at the time. Separating accountability from self-hatred is another critical step. Accountability is facing the truth of your actions, making amends where possible, and learning from mistakes. Self-hatred is believing that mistakes define your essence. Detoxing from guilt is about practicing this distinction daily. When you falter, you do not erase the lesson. You absorb it without letting it poison your self-worth. You hold responsibility without holding condemnation. Detox is also about letting go of imagined debts. Often, guilt extends far beyond reality. You carry weight that was never yours to bear. The pain of others, the expectations of society, the what-ifs and if-onlys that shadow every decision. These imagined obligations act as additional dealers, feeding the addiction to guilt and ensuring dependency. Release them. They are illusions. They do not define your capacity to heal or to live fully. This process is not linear. There will be setbacks, days when guilt resurfaces like an unwelcome guest at a celebration. You may apologize too much, overcorrect, or ruminate. These are part of the withdrawal. Notice them. Do not fight them with anger or self-recrimination. Each time you observe guilt without succumbing to it, you weaken its grip. Each conscious choice to act with presence rather than compulsion is a victory in the detox process. Detoxing from guilt also means redefining your relationship with emotions. You may have been taught that guilt is noble, that feeling bad is proof of morality, that suffering is evidence of care. While empathy and conscience are essential, chronic guilt is corrosive. Learn to experience emotions fully without letting them dictate self-worth. Guilt can be a teacher, not a master. You can listen without obeying. Another key practice is self-compassion. Speak to yourself as you would to a loved one emerging from the grip of addiction, confusion, or pain. Allow mistakes to exist as part of the human experience. Recognize that growth is possible and inevitable when judgment is replaced by understanding. Self-compassion is the antidote to the chronic guilt that has long been the emotional high you could not escape. Detoxing from guilt is also liberation from external expectations. You have been carrying not only personal guilt, but societal guilt, familial guilt, guilt projected onto you by others, and guilt inherited from collective experiences. Untangling yourself from these forces is essential. You cannot heal fully if you remain bound by the expectations and emotions of others. Choose to honor your truth, even when it conflicts with external pressures. The final stage of detox is integration. You carry your past, your mistakes, and your lessons, but you no longer let them dictate your present or your future. You internalize the understanding that you are worthy of peace, stability, and joy, independent of the pain you once endured or the guilt you once carried. The dealer's influence diminishes and emotional autonomy emerges. You are free to exist without chasing highs or enduring unnecessary lows. Detoxing from guilt is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong practice. It requires vigilance, reflection, and compassion. It demands patience with yourself, as withdrawal is uncomfortable and relapse into old thought patterns is inevitable. But every moment of awareness, every conscious choice to release guilt, every act of self-compassion strengthens your emotional sobriety. And when detox takes hold, life feels different. Decisions are made from clarity rather than compulsion. Relationships are experienced with presence rather than projection. Joy, stability, and peace are no longer foreign. And the dealer, guilt, loses its hold. You are no longer addicted to the highs of hurt or the intoxication of blame. You live instead, fully, consciously, and free. Detoxing from guilt teaches a profound truth that peace, self-worth, and freedom are not contingent on suffering, that mistakes are lessons, not chains, that accountability and self-hatred are distinct, and that forgiveness, especially of oneself, is not a weakness, but the foundation of emotional sobriety. You can release guilt without losing the wisdom it contains. You can honor your past without being imprisoned by it, and in that release, you find the capacity to finally live unburdened. Chapter 10, The Sobriety of Peace. Peace feels strange at first. After years of living on the high of hurt, after enduring the adrenaline rush of chaos, the intoxication of guilt, the tension of struggle, calm can feel foreign, almost suspicious. The mind wonders if it is real, if it is fragile, if it will vanish the moment you relax. And that's natural. The nervous system has been trained to survive on highs and crashes, to crave drama, to fear stillness. Sobriety of peace begins with recognition that life does not need to be a series of emotional spikes to be meaningful, that stability does not mean stagnation, that calm is not weakness. For so long, you may have equated pain with purpose, struggle with validation, and chaos with identity. Sobriety of peace asks you to unlearn all of it. It asks you to sit in quiet without discomfort, to feel without distraction, to exist without chaos as a prop for significance. The first step is presence. Notice the moments when life is simple, stable, or gentle. Notice the mundane routines, the quiet victories, the ordinary conversations, the hours when nothing explodes or shatters. These are not empty. These are not insignificant. They are proof that life can exist outside the spectrum of highs and lows you've been addicted to. Presence is the gateway to freedom. Sobriety also requires acceptance. You cannot manufacture a perfect life, and peace does not mean perfection. It means embracing reality without unnecessary resistance. Joy and grief, success and failure, calm and tension, these all exist together. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the conscious choice to meet life as it is, rather than as the chaos-addicted mind demands it to be. Another cornerstone is intentionality. The sober mind acts deliberately rather than reactively. You choose your responses rather than being swept away by old patterns. When you encounter conflict, you pause before responding. When faced with temptation to self-sabotage, you notice the impulse and redirect it. When guilt whispers that you are undeserving, you counter it with awareness and self-compassion. Intentionality is the muscle that strengthens sobriety. Sobriety of peace also asks you to cultivate self-trust. The nervous system may rebel, warning you that calm is dangerous or unearned. Old patterns of seeking highs may flare. The temptation to create chaos, to chase pain, to endure struggle for validation, it will persist. But with repetition, patience, and conscious practice, you learn to trust that stability is safe, that calm is reliable, and that joy is not fleeting unless you make it so. Part of this sobriety is emotional regulation. Without the intoxication of highs and lows, the nervous system needs to learn balance. You begin to experience emotions fully, but without over-identifying with them. Anger is felt and released. Sadness is acknowledged and expressed. Fear is confronted and transcended. You learn that emotions are data, not dictators. They inform without controlling. You navigate life with presence rather than reaction, wisdom rather than impulse. Relationships shift as sobriety deepens. You no longer cling to people for chaos or validation. You do not tolerate toxicity because it feels familiar. You engage with others from choice, not compulsion. Love, friendship, and connection are experienced with clarity and boundaries. You recognize patterns that once triggered self-sabotage and gently steer toward healthier interactions. In sobriety, relationships become nourishing rather than addictive. Sobriety of peace also includes gratitude for life, for growth, for survival, and even for past pain that taught lessons. Pain is no longer a high to chase. It is a teacher whose class is complete. The nervous system no longer needs the rush of struggle to feel alive. Stability becomes a sanctuary, and presence becomes the measure of vitality. You are alive fully, not because life is dramatic, but because you are awake to it. The sober mind recognizes that freedom is internal. You no longer need external chaos, drama, or suffering to validate existence. Peace is no longer frightening, it is empowering. Calm is no longer suspect, it is nourishing. Joy is no longer conditional, it is a choice. In this state, you operate from wholeness rather than deficit, from clarity rather than compulsion, from presence rather than distraction. Detox, hangovers, self-sabotage, guilt, and struggle were all part of the journey. But sobriety of peace is the destination. It is not a fleeting moment, but a practice, a daily commitment, a conscious engagement with life unclouded by addiction to pain. It is the realization that the highs you once sought were illusions, and the stability, joy, and calm you now inhabit are real, earned, and sustainable. Sobriety also redefines purpose. Purpose is no longer measured by suffering endured, chaos survived, or guilt carried. Purpose is measured by clarity, growth, and intentional living. You can contribute, create, love, and exist fully without seeking validation through struggle. You can act with integrity, presence, and authenticity, and find fulfillment in the process rather than in the drama of the past. Finally, sobriety of peace is liberation. It is the freedom to live without emotional addiction, to experience life without compulsive highs and crashes, to trust in your own capacity to navigate reality with balance. It is the understanding that peace is not passive, it is active. It requires vigilance, awareness, and practice. But it is sustainable, nourishing, and profoundly transformative. In the sober state, you can finally experience yourself fully. Your identity is not bound to pain. Your worth is not tied to struggle. Your happiness is not contingent on chaos. You are whole, simply because you are, and nothing more is required. Sobriety of peace is the culmination of the journey, the place where emotional addiction ends and conscious, intentional, stable living begins. Peace, in this sense, is the highest high. Not because it is dramatic or intoxicating, but because it is real, reliable, and unshakable. You no longer chase it, you live it. You no longer fear it, you trust it. You no longer mistake it for emptiness. You know it is the foundation of everything that matters. The sober life is not an absence of feeling. It is the presence of clarity, of self-mastery, and of freedom. Chapter 11, Conclusion. If this book has taken you through the highs and lows of emotional addiction, then you have traveled a long road, one that is familiar, uncomfortable, and ultimately illuminating. From the first dose of pain, through tolerance, withdrawal, self-sabotage, and the false security of struggle, to the emotional hangovers, detox, and the sobriety of peace, you have witnessed the anatomy of an addiction that is not chemical, but emotional. Throughout this journey, one truth remains. Pain can be seductive. It offers familiarity when calm feels strange. It offers purpose when peace feels empty. It convinces you that highs of chaos are necessary, that guilt is deserved, and that struggle is validation. The human mind is remarkably adaptable, capable of building comfort out of suffering, and yet equally capable of learning freedom when awareness is applied. If you recognize yourself in these pages, know this. You are not alone. Many of us have walked the same path, chasing the emotional highs of hurt, repeating cycles that feel inevitable, and questioning whether peace is possible. These patterns are not signs of failure. They are proof of humanity. They are proof that the mind seeks what it knows, even when it is destructive. The chapters in this book were designed as a mirror. To see the first dose is to understand how hurt chose you. To see tolerance is to recognize how endurance can become addiction. To see withdrawal and hangovers is to confront the cost of highs and the aftermath of chaos. To meet the dealers, guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia, is to recognize the externalized faces of internal patterns. To witness self-sabotage and the false security of struggle is to glimpse the unconscious compulsions that keep peace at arm's length. And finally, to explore detox and sobriety is to learn that freedom is not only possible, but attainable. The journey is not linear. Healing is not a straight path. You will revisit old patterns, misstep, and doubt your progress. But the difference lies in awareness. Each moment of recognition, each conscious choice to step away from the high of hurt, each decision to allow peace is an act of reclamation. These small, repeated acts compound into transformation. Change is incremental, and it is permanent only when it is practiced consistently. One of the most profound lessons is the separation of identity from pain. You are not your suffering. You are not your guilt. You are not your struggles, your mistakes, or your failures. These are experiences, and they carry lessons, but they do not define your essence. Detoxing from guilt, resisting self-sabotage, embracing calm, these are tools to reclaim yourself from the emotional cycles that have controlled your life for too long. Peace is not passive. Stability is not boring. Joy is not fleeting unless you choose to let it slip. Sobriety of peace requires presence, intentionality, and self-compassion. It demands that you learn to sit in calm without creating chaos, to engage in life without compulsion, and to experience emotions without letting them dictate self-worth. It asks you to redefine purpose, not by struggle endured, but by clarity, growth, and conscious choice. Another critical takeaway is the power of reflection. Emotional addiction thrives in distraction, in denial, and in avoidance. Awareness interrupts this cycle. When you can step back from the rush of highs and the aftermath of hangovers, observe the patterns of behavior, and name the cravings for chaos, you reclaim agency. Observation without judgment is revolutionary. It transforms suffering into insight and chaos into understanding. This book does not offer a formula, a magic solution, or a step-by-step guide. Its purpose is to illuminate patterns, provoke reflection, and encourage conscious choice. The words within are intended as a mirror for your own experiences, a map of the emotional landscape many traverse, and a guide toward noticing the invisible chains that guilt, pain, and struggle impose. Your journey is your own, and your conclusions may differ from anyone else's. The final lesson is subtle but powerful. Freedom is internal. No external circumstance, relationship, or crisis can grant the peace that awareness and choice cultivate. The dealer's influence, guilt, shame, fear, nostalgia, loses power when you recognize it, resist it, and refuse to trade emotional currency for temporary highs. The highs of hurt are fleeting, but the clarity, stability, and peace you cultivate endure. If you leave this book with one understanding, let it be this: your past, your pain, and your mistakes do not have to dictate your future. You are capable of observing patterns without obeying them, of feeling without over-identifying, of forgiving yourself without excusing behavior. You can reclaim your life from emotional addiction and live consciously, steadily, and fully. And yet, this is not a prescription. You will decide what these words mean in your life. You will interpret, integrate, and reflect. Your conclusions, your feelings, your personal experiences are essential. No one can tell you exactly how to navigate your own highs, withdrawals, or hangovers. The journey is yours to explore, and the wisdom gained will always carry a personal resonance that no text can fully prescribe. So, as you close this chapter, consider the entire journey. Reflect on the highs, the lows, the hangovers, the detox, the sobriety, and the subtle choices that have led you here. Ask yourself, which patterns do I recognize in my own life? Which highs do I chase? Which hangovers have left a mark? What does peace feel like for me? Your answers are the final chapter, a chapter only you can write. In the end, the high of hurt teaches more than pain ever could. It teaches awareness, resilience, insight, and the capacity to choose differently. It teaches that peace, when cultivated, is not a reward but a state of being. It teaches that freedom from emotional addiction is possible, and it begins with noticing, understanding, and choosing. The words you have read are only a guide. The lessons are only a framework. Your reflections, your conclusions, and your integration of these ideas are the true measure of understanding. Step into your own life, fully present, fully aware, and fully sober from the highs of hurt. The journey does not end here. It begins anew, every moment, every choice, every breath. Dedication. I dedicate this book to my grandmas, whose life, wisdom, and stories have shaped the way I see the world and myself. You taught me that the truths we are afraid to speak, the pains we try to hide, and the questions we dare not ask are not burdens. They are bridges. Bridges that connect hearts, invite understanding, and offer the chance to grow together. Through our conversations, our laughter, and even our silences, I have learned that speaking about the hidden parts of ourselves is not weakness, but courage. It is in these moments, raw, honest, unfiltered, that connection deepens, healing begins, and love takes root. Your voice, your stories, and your presence have been a sanctuary for reflection, for learning, and for transformation. You have shown me that life's complexities, its griefs, its mistakes, and even its missteps are not things to be feared or buried, but to be understood, shared, and woven into the tapestry of who we are becoming. Because of you, I have learned that to face pain is to honor it. To honor it is to release it, and to release it is to grow into the fullness of life. This book is a testament to you, to your patience, your wisdom, and the safe space you have created for me to explore, question, and express. Thank you for letting me carry these lessons, for allowing me to speak openly, and for teaching me that love is not just an emotion, but a practice of listening, learning, and healing together. I love you all. I love our bond, our shared reflections, and the sacred space we have built to navigate the hidden truths of our lives. This book is our conversation carried into the world, a reminder that it is okay to feel, to confront, and to grow. It is because of you that I know healing is possible, connection is profound, and love is enduring.